Everybody, and welcome to the Frontline Club. We're discussing the American elections, which are, I think, probably the greatest fun and the worst nightmare that most journalists who ever have anything to do with the United States have ever had. Every time we go there, and I've been there 3 times this year. I think Gavin's been there at least 3 probably, yeah. I don't know, and Harriet Sherwood's been there for a long stint. Every time you go there, you think you are going to the defining moment when you'll be able to wake up and say to the viewers, it's happened, and all you were able to say was that John McCain had won the Republican nomination, and people yawn. Well, of course, this is a historic moment. It's a quite incredible campaign, because you could never have written it. You could have never written that the oldest man ever to compete for the White House, I don't mean that, I don't rub out Ronald Reagan, but he wasn't that old when he started. He's running. The first black candidate that has a serious chance is running, and of course the first woman with a serious chance is running. And of course feminists, egalitarianists, eclectivists are all terribly torn, and there we are. We're all very concerned because we think everyone's going to rip over his throats to pieces, and that's it. But anyway, here we have 2 people here who have reported for the BBC and the Guardian, and Bill, who is the fount of all fun and frolic as far as polling goes, on the line, and we'll get going immediately. First of all, Harriet, your thoughts on this election? Are we anywhere near a Democrat resolution?
I think we're getting there, and when I spent 6 weeks in the States at the start of this year, and when I was there I felt very enthusiastic and energized by the campaign, because I thought it was people were taking part in a democratic process that hadn't been engaged in politics for years, and there was a real sense of wanting change in American politics. And since I've been back for about a month or a bit more, I've got kind of increasingly depressed about it, because I think that having gone from this situation where there was this kind of sense of tremendous energy and hope and kind of revival of political participation, we're now in a situation where we're kind of very much back to old-style politics of taking lumps out of one another, a party that's very divided. I'm really talking about the Democrats here. A party that's very divided, that's damaging itself, that you can't see any easy, comfortable outcome that the party will be at ease with. So I think, you know, I'll stick my neck out. I think in the end Hillary will win the nomination, although she may then go on to lose the election. But I mean, obviously, you know, I've been kind of wrong on everything so far in this election.
Well, just let me pause you there, and before I go to Gavin, let's go to Bill. Bill, that's true. We all started off with the thrill of seeing the engagement of people who had never participated before. Has that begun to fade, or are still people who have never participating right now?
There's still a huge burst of turnout. We saw it in Mississippi just on Tuesday when there was a record turnout there, particularly of African-American voters. There's still a lot of enthusiasm, a huge desire for change, and the voters find this very exciting. You know, one of the things we often get criticized for in the political analysis business, all journalists do in the United States, is, quote, covering the campaign as if it were a horse race. Well, let me tell you something. It's a horse race. And that's what excites viewers and readers. They're very excited by this. They want to know who's going to win. People come up to me in the street and they say, who do you think is going to win? This is very exciting, and they're deeply engaged in it. That aspect really cannot be ignored. And I would add that anyone who knows who's going to win this nomination for the Democrats is grossly misinformed. Well, because the fact is, nobody knows anything. It could turn out Hillary, it could turn out Obama. They could end up together on the ticket in either order. No one knows.
What about the other point that Harriet raised, which is that real damage is now going to be done to the Democrat Party? Do you detect damage in your polling? Do you detect the 2 candidates beginning to lose shine for people for whom they once had shine?
Only beginning, and that's because it's becoming more embittered, the fight between Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. So far, when we poll Democrats, they always say they like them both. And still, most Democrats say they'd be happy if either one were nominated. But we are beginning to detect some ill will. Some harsh words are being passed between the 2 of them. We're seeing some Democrats who say they could never vote for Hillary Clinton. And I must say that's more on the Obama side, because the Obama supporters are the ones new to politics. They are not typical hardcore partisan voters. And a lot of them see Hillary Clinton as the Democratic establishment. They're the outsiders, they believe, even though a good part of the establishment is supporting Barack Obama, including the last nominee, John Kerry, and Edward Kennedy. Nevertheless, the Obama people consider themselves the anti-establishment force, and they are really overtaken by this sense that somehow, somewhere, there is this vast Clintonian conspiracy that with the party establishment, this conspiracy is going to seize the nomination from Senator Obama, and that is really engendering some bitterness.
Very interesting. But Bill, I just want to work out how long we've got you for so that we can know how to ration our usage of you. How long have we got you? Yeah.
I'm not in a rush. I'm all right for at least an hour.
Oh, you good man. Right. Stay with us. Now, I'm now going to talk to the BBC's Gavin Hewitt. Gavin, let's have a bit of colour from what it's like actually to be. I, unlike you, have not actually been physically in the same room as Obama, but I have been perhaps once too often in the same room as Hillary Clinton. Just talk us through what it's like to be with Obama. Have you spoken to him?
I have, but not recently. First of all, this is fantastic theatre. I mean, I agree, this is a horse race and people love it. And on a Sunday morning, bitterly cold, I was in Wilmington, Delaware, at about 8 o'clock in the morning, and there were queues stretching around the block, 20,000 people waiting to hear Barack Obama. Now, imagine in this country, Sunday morning, how many people would turn up for a politician? I mean, if you could get 20, I'd be surprised. And the great thing that Barack Obama has done is drawn in people who don't normally go to rallies. I met lots and lots of people who are pretty alienated from politics. They enjoy turning up there, and he is, although Harriet says she's heard him on a bad day, he is a fantastically inspirational speaker. When I heard him that day and I was standing quite close to him, I almost forgot that I was there as a journalist. And then you suddenly think, oh, I've got to be skeptical about all of this. But he has the ability to absolutely capture a crowd. Now, what's happened, I think, and I noticed it this time in Ohio and Texas, the Clinton campaign, who have begun to go after him, particularly on his experience, whether he'd be the right guy to answer a crisis phone call at 3 a.m. in the morning, I think that is beginning to hurt him. And I think what he set out to do was to say, I'm going to end the culture wars. I want to change the nature of the debate in America. I don't want to, play politics as it's normally played. Now, the trap which the Clintons are, if you like, laying for him is, look, we'll get down and dirty, and in a sense, he will be tempted to fight back. And that's already happening. I mean, there was that great quote from Hillary Clinton when she was asked, is he a Muslim? And she replied, well, he's not a Muslim, as far as I know. And in those...
Wasn't it he says he's not a Muslim?
Yeah, well,
even worse.
Well, Bill will probably be able to tell us.
Bill, did he say he says he's not a Muslim, or he... I can't remember what the answer was.
Well, his answer was, I don't remember either. I know you were correct in what she said. She said, as far as I know, and she's taken a lot of criticism for that. Landry said very directly, he is a Christian, he belongs to a Christian church, but there are rumors all over the internet because of his middle name and that Sudanese costume he wore. There's always bound to be these kinds of conspiracy theories, but she took a lot of criticism for seeming to hedge on her response.
Let's cut then to Hillary. Inspirational?
I saw Hillary speak a couple of times, and the first time she was the opposite of inspirational. It was the night before the New Hampshire primary, a very cold, bitter night. Thousands of people turned out to a school in a small town, and she kind of spoke for an hour or more, and it was detailed, it was about policy, it was kind of dull, really. And then she took questions for about another 40 minutes, and people were leaving the hall, and I thought, this woman just hasn't captured, hasn't electrified this audience. And I'd seen Obama about 2 or 3 times by that point, and I thought, there's no way she can do it. And then, of course, the next night she won the New Hampshire primary. So, that was one of the occasions that I was wrong. And then I saw her later in South Carolina, and it was a midweek afternoon. and she was completely different. She was absolutely brilliant. She sort of just connected with the audience. She was relaxed. She was funny. She was anecdotal. She was warm. Her grasp of policy, the first time, which had seemed quite dull, the second time just seemed very, very impressive. You know, she talked about serious issues. She took questions. She could answer all the questions in a really authoritative way. So I kind of saw her twice, and they were kind of a completely different person.
There was a brilliant piece in the FT 2 Saturdays ago talking about her insincerity.
Oh, yeah.
That she has a terrible insincerity problem. But she is very good on policy and the rest of it. But I must say, in the times that I saw her in New Hampshire and in Ohio, she was hard work.
So maybe it was the same New Hampshire.
She was cold. She was humorless. And what was worst was to see Bill there. Bill's been got out of the picture now, but to see Bill there, actually, it's so extraordinary how Bill Clinton, having once been this sort of charismatic, extraordinary, is now a sort of ghost of Bill, sort of looming over her shoulder, and you think, no, no, please God, not again. But Bill Schneider, can we just come back then to, I think, the sort of polling which might really instruct our very large audience here, a couple of hundred people, 250 people. There's only standing room here now. I wanted to ask you this. If you now recognise McCain as the Republican, which is not a very big if, because he is, what do your polls tell you about whether Hillary Clinton can beat him, or whether Obama is in fact is strategically the better candidate?
The polls say the following. Both Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama are running ahead of John McCain, not safely ahead. She leads him by roughly 5 or 6 points, which is usually within the margin of error. Obama consistently polls better against McCain than Clinton does. He's about 10 or 12 points ahead of McCain. So there's no question that he polls stronger than Hillary Clinton, but you cannot argue that he wins, she loses. It looks like they both win, though he is a safer bet apparently at the moment. The polls are very clear on that.
That cues McCain. Have you done a bit of McCain?
I haven't recently. I mean, it's going to be very interesting. Here is the oldest man ever to run for president against either an African-American or a woman. But the one thing he will emphasize time and time again is that he has experience, that he knows foreign leaders. He's been to Iraq probably more times than any other senator. But on the other hand, the problem that he's got, and I think this explains the rise of Obama, is that I, who've been going backwards and forwards to America for a long time, have never sensed such a desire for change, the sense that the country is on the wrong track. And therefore, McCain's big problem, even though, of course, he fought George Bush for the presidency and is regarded as an independent, in terms of foreign policy, when you listen what he has to say about Iraq, essentially what he's saying, I'll continue with George W. Bush's policies there. And I think, come the election, he thinks that will be a great strength. I'm not so certain of that. And that will be, I think, Iraq at the moment is not the big issue in America, it's the economy. And that may well remain the case. But I think that come the autumn, because of what John McCain says about Iraq, which is essentially, we stay there until victory. That is what his view is. Now, I think both Obama and Clinton are somewhat muddled about what they would do over Iraq. I think there will be a real argument, which we didn't get last time, between John Kerry and George W. Bush. So I think that will be very interesting. And he will say, you know, I'm the most experienced person, I know what to do over foreign policy, but I think he can be taken down over that.
Well, I have done McCain. I did him in Connecticut. And he's quite funny. Very good about producing his mother on stage. No better card can an old man play than produce a very fine-looking 95-year-old woman who does appear indeed to be his mother. If she isn't, she's a great...
Well, that would be a big story.
She's a great walk-on part. But I think the one thing I'd like to tap from both of you is the presence of George Bush, or the ghost of George Bush, on the campaign. Because one of the reassuring things for a British hack, I find, is how despairing vast numbers of Republicans and Democrats are about George Bush. They're ashamed of him. They think that he's largely to blame for the economy. They hate what he's done on the war. They understand how America has been reduced abroad.
I think that's absolutely right. I mean, I think that people in America are desperate to kind of move on from the Bush era, and he's been very absent. When I was there and was covering some of the sort of Republican fights before it became evident that McCain was the candidate, Bush was someone who was never mentioned. You know, everyone went on about Ronald Reagan. No one ever mentioned Bush. And in fact, I wondered when Bush did endorse McCain a couple of weeks ago, doing his little jig on the White House lawn, whether that was something that would really work in McCain's favour or not. But I think that there is very much a mood in America that we have to kind of draw a line in the sand and move on from this. And I think that, you know, that McCain will be if he wins, will be a very different president from Bush. I mean, I worry about his hawkishness. He obviously is very pro-Iraq, as Gavin says, but he's also very pro-military intervention in Iran. He's very anti any kind of negotiation or discussion with America's enemies like Syria. And I think that it's a very hawkish approach. But I mean, I think there will also be quite significant differences.
Bill, is there a detectable presence of George Bush in... I mean, would it be too strong to say that George Bush has bequeathed the environment in which it's possible for an Obama candidacy and indeed a McCain candidacy to flower? Could a different president perhaps have made neither electable?
Look, politics is all about timing. Every good politician knows that. Disraeli gave that advice to an undergraduate who asked him what he must know to enter public life, and Disraeli wrote back, "You must know yourself, and you must know the times." Well, George Bush has defined the times, and Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, and John McCain are all, in different ways, running against those times. When Barack Obama runs against Bush, he's not just running against Bush, he's also running against the Clinton wars. He talks about changing the politics of the last 20 years, which would include the Clinton era. When I look at elections, I mean, what I do, I try to define what I call the missing imperative. That thing which is missing that people want. And the politician who can figure that out usually has the election won. I think right now, I wouldn't say he has the election run, but the guy who's come closest is Barack Obama. He's offering Americans what they are desperately looking for, which is a uniter. Someone who can deliver what George Bush promised the day he declared his candidacy for the presidency in November 1999, when he said in Austin, Texas, "I'm going to be a uniter, not a divider." After 8 years of division and Clinton wars, that was very welcome. He took a divided country and divided it even worse. So Barack Obama quite consciously is running as a consensus builder because that's what the times are looking for. That is one reason why McCain is doing well in the polls, even though he's many people think he'd be a third term for George Bush. He's different. He's able to reach beyond the conservative base, which doesn't entirely trust him. You have to understand the times, and right now, the times are very eager to find someone who can rebuild a consensus in the United States that has been demolished for the last 20 years.
And statistically, Bill, when you look at Clinton and Obama, am I right in saying Obama appears to be more able to get independent votes when they're allowed to participate in a primary? Some primaries independents can't participate in, but when they are, and indeed Republicans when they can cross over, which of those two candidates tends to secure the crossovers and the independents?
No question. Obama gets more crossover votes, more independents. He reaches beyond the party base. The way I like to define the terms of the choice here for Democrats is she delivers, he inspires. I mean, that's what they see in each candidate. Ideally, the Democrats talk about putting them both on a ticket because they want someone who can do both, who can deliver and who can inspire. But he clearly is a candidate who is able to inspire not just Democrats, but beyond the Democratic Party. And he does draw crossover votes, as for that matter does McCain. The only of the one of the three candidates who does not do well with crossover voters is Clinton. She does very well with the partisan Democratic base. The seniors, the self-described strong Democrats, the union members, the blue-collar voters. Those are the people that she really draws out. And in the states where that base is largest, she tends to win. She does very well. And that is why this is a fight.
Well, there's a feast of material we haven't touched upon yet. I'm going to pause just right there and open it up to the floor. There's superdelegates. There's a whole heap of stuff out there. How black is Barack Obama and all that. A fantastic thing when I was in New York to see the New York Times running an article about drug taking and Obama. And instead of the usual, this man snorted when he was at university, disbelieving that he'd snorted enough to warrant putting it in his book, and challenging, finding people that had been in the university saying, well, if he did, we didn't really know about it. I thought it was absolutely fantastic that now the thing to do is to hunt down the lie in the book, that the man didn't do as much drugs as he claimed. I mean, heaven has dawned. Right, so who's going to open up some questioning here? Anybody from the floor? Yes. Wait 1 sec, because we must get the mic to you so that Bill can hear your question.
Okay, it's actually a question picking up something Gavin said. Why do you think there isn't that level of enthusiasm that you described in, like in New Hampshire, for candidates here in the UK that there is, that you see in the US?
Wow, it's a very difficult question. I mean, it goes down to our whole system and how we elect candidates here. And perhaps I won't get too drawn down that. And we have the parliamentary system, and actually a president isn't really a leader of a party in the same way that a prime minister is a leader of a party. But let me say this: I do think there is a real case for injecting theatre, passion into politics. It's amazing to me the number of people in America who want to go and listen to these candidates. Now, come the general election in the autumn, and I suspect John remembers it from last time, you could go and listen to John Kerry speaking in Madison, Wisconsin at a lunchtime, and you would get Bruce Springsteen on stage and you'd get Dave Grohl from the Foo Fighters. Now, I mean, you may say that's the trivialization of politics. I don't see it like that. It's a way that makes politics feel of it's part of a society as a whole. And I don't see in any time in the near future that we will have that same kind of enthusiasm in this country. I regret it. I'd love to see large rallies. And, you know, it sometimes really tests a politician when they don't just have to appear on television, but they have to get up in front of an audience and deliver. And just as Harriet said, there must be off days when even Barack Obama, gets it wrong and he can't really, commit. And I've also seen the two Hillary Clintons. I've seen this dreadful, focused on detail, too strident, too long. And then I've also seen her punchy, concise, really hitting what particularly working people are interested in. And so I'm a great believer in the theatre of politics, and that people should get out there and talk to ordinary people. If it happens soon in this country, I'd be delighted.
But didn't Neil Kinnock try that and he failed with it?
Well, he did.
Get the mic to him. Sorry.
I said, didn't Neil Kinnock try the fun fair, and that it was disaster for him?
Well, I think we're going a little bit back in history, but just to say, if my memory serves me well, it was what he said. It wasn't so much that there was theatre. I think it was the punching in the air and doing various things which didn't go down very well. So I think, I'm not saying that if you have large crowds and you're good in front of large crowds, you necessarily win. But it is, to me, refreshing to find the energy at these rallies, day after day. And sometimes, and I went to one with Bill Clinton. There was one day, about 10 days ago, down in Texas. He did 7 or 8 events in a day. I mean, it's extraordinary. Whatever we may say about his role in this election, here again is a master performer who can work a crowd. He's quite brilliant, whatever you think of him in terms of working a crowd. And to have that energy and dynamism to say, I'm going to do 7 or 8 rallies in a day, I mean, it's extraordinary.
I mean, Bill, you have to do a pretty punishing schedule, but don't you sometimes wonder whether one of these candidates may not actually peg out from exhaustion?
It is quite amazing the stamina that they have to keep for their schedules. I mean, they are constantly rushing around, sometimes 5 or 6 states in one day, 7 or 8 meetings, rallies, fundraisers. Never mind the rallies and speeches. Do you realize that these candidates do 30 fundraisers every month where they're meeting with people who are giving them money, and they have to talk to them one by one? Many of these people are giving well, they can give a maximum of $2,300, but they are meeting with them and they have to talk to them. And as they're talking to them, they have to assure the person, your opinions are important to me, and as far as I'm concerned, you are the only person in the entire world I'm listening to right now. And they do this over and over again, day after day, month after month. Some argue that the length of our campaigns is good training for the kind of stamina one must have as President of the United States. It's a test.
Harriet, I think it was Jonathan Friedland in your paper said bring on the primaries in Britain.
Absolutely, I can't agree with him more. I mean, I went to a caucus in Iowa just after I arrived there very early on in January, and again it was a bitterly cold night, and I was hugely impressed by the number of people who had turned out, who kind of trudged through the wind and the kind of minus 20-degree wind chill factor, and had come to a school gym to vote for the candidate of their choice. And I talked to lots of people, and these were kind of ordinary folk who'd been at work all day long, who'd perhaps left the kids with a babysitter, or, you know, perhaps one parent had come and the other had stayed at home, and they were engaged. Lots of them were undecided. Lots of them had arrived at this gym not knowing who they were going to vote for, although many did, and it was a fairly chaotic scene. There were far more people than the precinct captain was expecting, and eventually, you know, he said, "Okay, divide into your groups," and people had to go and stand in the, you know, under the placard of their candidate, and then several were eliminated and they had to regroup, and there were debates and arguments going along all the time, and the precinct captain asked representatives of each group to come and sort of pitch for their candidate. It was an amazing experience of democracy in action, and it was very, very good humoured. There were no nasty arguments, and I thought, God, wouldn't it be fantastic if this could be replicated in Britain? In fact, Michelle Obama came to this caucus, and she was hugely impressive because she's you know, very kind of tall and you know, very engaging, and she was going around the room, and she came to me and, you know, thrust out her hand and said, you know, I'm so glad I can count on you for your support. And I just kept completely silent. I thought, if I open my mouth, now I'm British, and now I'm not a voter.
I mean, that in a way raises something which I think it would be nice to move on to, but we'll take any number of questions as well. And that is actually reporting these things. Because, of course, Bill, just to sort of keep you in the loop, we are third worlders. I mean, there are no votes. I mean, of course, there are Democrats abroad and Republicans abroad, but I mean, there are no votes, effectively, outside the United States. I know they counted a lot in the 2000 election because of the Florida Chads, but generally speaking, we are third worlders, and we're complete scum. We're not worth interviewing. I mean, they won't give us an interview. Quite understandably, they've got to keep their powder dry for you know, real voters, local stations, etc. And so you are very much in the back of the shed. You have a chance of being in the front if you've been with the candidate from the very beginning. I was with Gary Hart in 1984 in a minivan with 6 other reporters before the New Hampshire election, in which he did very, very well. But that's extremely rare, that you just happen to hit the guy on the right day and you make your mark, the lanky Brit, and you're seen as the sort of figure of fun at the back of the bus. But so instead, we have to do stunts. And I don't know, I'll just give a couple, and I'm sure you will. But for example, in this icy state of Iowa, you Google it, you Lonely Planet it, and it's a pretty grim. It's a beautiful state. It's flat, and it's snowy, and it's got red Dutch barns, and it never changes. It's still the same the next election and the last. And so I looked up, and it said it had the biggest truck stop in the world, and I thought, well, the thing about this is we've got to try and make viewers realise that Iowa is going to make a statement which will in a sense wake the entire nation up into who is the favourite and the rest of it. So where does the nation come together in Iowa? Well, at the truck stop. And when you get to the truck stop, which of course is in 3 feet of snow and bloody cold, and people have slid off the road in altogether, 200 miles from Des Moines, you've driven all the way down there and you've got to get back and transmit and all the rest of it. But anyway, you get there and you start looking around the trucks, and sure enough, and they are gorgeous trucks, huge, you know, double beds, loos, bathrooms, and everything, part of the sort of driver's cab. They live in them, and they have kitchens and this and that. And so you start talking to the guys, you look at their number plates, New Mexico, Washington State, California, Kansas. It's absolutely incredible. They have come from all the four corners, and there's 2,500 of these things in this truck stop. And of course you go around, you know, waggling your microphone in the window, trying to get the driver to wind it down in these icy conditions. And the amazing thing in America, I don't know what you find, they love doing vox pops. Yeah. They want to tell you everything. I mean, you waggle a microphone in front of somebody at a Bolton truck stop, and they'll tell you to fuck off. I mean, for every 10 people you approach in America, 8 talk to you. For every 10 people you approach in Britain, 2 talk to you. That's the sort of psephology that even Bill would recognise as scientific. But seriously, you are looking for a stunt. And my good friend and colleague Sarah Smith in Texas found a cowboy poetry festival. Well, what madder combination than cowboyism and poetry? But it flowed like poetry. I mean, I don't know about writers, whether you have to find stunts, but you agree?
I do agree, yes. And I also agree, when you do vox pops in this country, people often use this phrase, oh, that's not for me to say. You never, ever hear that in America. The reason being, at high school in America, everybody in class has to get up and give a presentation. And also, because of the way their system is put together, everybody believes that power comes from the bottom up. So it's the idea, you're asking me my opinion, you're damn right I've got an opinion, I'll give it to you. Whereas for some reason, may go down to history, may go down to various other institutions, but in this country, a lot of people will say to you, that's not for me to say, as if there is some great class higher up where you should be talking to them. But stunts, yes, one of the great difficulties is getting to the candidates. I got 4 questions, I think, once with John Kerry, and literally after your 4th question, you're virtually thrown off the chair by one of his aides. So what you end up doing, and this is a little bit of a stunt, but on the other hand, it's sometimes interesting, you try and throw, shout questions at the candidates in the hope you'll get some response. And usually, I mean, Hillary Clinton will never answer a question on the rope line. She is so disciplined. John's now going to tell me he got an answer, but I've never seen her answer one. Bill Clinton, on the other hand, is more interesting because when we were in, I think it was New York after Super Tuesday, I did throw a question to him, and he looked at me as if, I know I shouldn't answer, but then he said, I'm really proud of her. And you think, well, at least I've got something. But it's interesting, they are, certainly the Clinton campaign and with Bill, are trying to shut down those types of informal question and answers. And I was with Bill Clinton at something in Texas 10 days ago, and you are told that the Secret Service say you have to be put in a pen and can only come out of a pen when the candidate leaves. And Bill Schneider will be pleased to hear this, because I know CNN in the end did a report on this, because actually it isn't the Secret Service. It's because Bill Clinton's had a somewhat controversial role in this campaign. Essentially what they've said, this man who loves talking to anybody, no, shut up, Bill, say something from the stage, but don't become loose-lipped. And so now he's become difficult to get hold of.
Go for it, Bill.
Let me comment. There has been a dramatic change in American campaigns. I mean, one of the reasons why our candidates don't often talk to the foreign press isn't simply because they're foreigners, but because they often get in trouble talking to the foreign press. You've seen that, or from governments even. You've seen that with Barack Obama's advisors talking to Canadians, and people giving interviews with Scottish newspapers and saying something they think will not be heard back in the United States. Well, with the arrival of the Internet and Internet journalism, there has been a dramatic change in the nature of the campaigns. Anything anyone says, not just the candidates, but their obscure academic advisors, Austin Goolsbee, Samantha Powers, anything they say. Now, Geraldine Ferraro made a remark to a tiny newspaper in a small town in California, which has caused a massive explosion. You make any kind of comment to anyone, anywhere, it gets reported and driven on the internet, and it becomes an enormous issue. This is new, it's different, and it makes politicians far more touchy than they ever have been in the past, and very about talking to anyone.
I like your reference there to Geraldine Ferraro. I must say, I just wondered, Bill, whether this, it sounds too conspiratorial, but this is precisely what they wanted said. Yeah. And who could they afford to lose? Dear old Geraldine Ferraro. I mean, chuck her to the wolves. But she'd said what needed to be said. And in a sense, you see there the way in which the Clintons may be trying to bring race into it.
But there was also the Obama advisor who described Hillary as a monster, who then to the Scotsman, I think, who then also had to resign. So I don't think it's just one on one side.
Right. Bill? Sorry.
No, I just wanted to.
Well,
carry on, Bill. Sorry.
Well, I could. All right. I was going to say that there are those who argue that.
No, carry on. I think the Skype needs renewing, so I think we should. Do you think we should dial it? What? There's another one, is it? What? Have another go, Bill. Carry on again.
Simply to add to that, there are many who believe that Bill Clinton's comments during the South Carolina campaign at the end of January were very deliberately planned, because you see, since Barack is running as a consensus builder and says he can appeal to everyone and he wants to govern by consensus, which, by the way, is a very insightful reading of how American government works. Our system operates by consensus. If there is no consensus, it's impossible to get anything done. But since that is his chosen political message, the Clinton campaign deliberately tried to provoke him because they wanted to prove to Democrats that he's not enough of a fighter. That when provoked, he is, to use the American idiom, a wuss. That he's weak, that he cannot defend himself, and he will not fight for the things he believes in. So there was the view that Bill Clinton deliberately tried to provoke Barack Obama to make a point that he doesn't have enough fight to be the party's nominee.
But there's a problem, isn't there? Because if Obama then engages in down and dirty politics and responds like with like, then he's essentially abandoning his whole pitch to the American people, which is, I am above this, there's a line in the sand, we're turning the page, it's a new start, a different kind of politics, and we're putting those kind of old machine politics behind us. Once he starts engaging in that kind of dirty tactics, then he's basically given up on that message. And so he's caught, isn't he, that either he takes the hits and is marked as a wuss, as you call it, or he fights back and then is betraying his principled stand.
I think he's been tempted recently to...
That is precisely correct, which is the situation the Clinton campaign is attempting to put him in, that he has to make that very difficult choice.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, it might be there quite an interesting moment to look at Barack Obama a little more closely. I like you, well, I mean, I think I'm even older than you are. I'm quite a lot older than you are, probably, but I was in 1984 present when Jesse Jackson made his first bid for the presidency, and he ran unashamedly, despite the Rainbow Coalition, very definitely as a black American candidate. Not even an African American candidate, because people were black in those days and not African American. And it was that there was, we were talking about the inheritance of slavery, of guilt, all the things which accompany the whole very tender balance in America between white and black. The thing with Barack Obama, which is so extraordinary, is that, of course, he is not of slave stock. He is actually a raw African American, but brought up in an entirely white environment. Anybody who wants to read one of the most brilliant books of our time, and I don't say this out of any favoritism for Obama, I don't have a favoritism for Obama, but it's a brilliant book, is Dreams from My Father, which Barack Obama wrote before he became anyway involved in politics, and which is a breathtaking and beautifully written insight into what it was like to grow up with an African father who left at the age of when he was only 2, not the father was 2, but Barack was 2, and a white mother who was, you know, quite a headbanger. I mean, a fun lady, but a very serious PhD student, but fairly heavily left radical. And then, you know, the African father goes, and the mother gets together with an Indonesian intellectual. They go to Indonesia. He develops this extraordinary worldview, and then he's sent home to grow up with his very conventional white grandparents, and never really meets any black kids until he gets to university. But it is worth reading it, because he absolutely is not a Jesse Jackson black American. That, in the end, is what makes him so extraordinarily difficult to compartmentalize, because he doesn't speak the language of black America.
And there's something very interesting. When he began his candidacy, a lot of African Americans said, this guy isn't black enough.
Yeah.
He didn't actually share the slavery experience. So initially, actually more African Americans were going for Hillary Clinton than were going for Barack Obama. Then, and I'm not quite certain of the reason for this, then there was a massive change when African Americans said, this is extraordinary. Here is a man who comes partly from Africa, partly from Hawaii or wherever. He could make it to the White House, and that will change things forever. And so I don't quite know when the date was. It might have been around...
Well, let's call Bill in. I mean, Bill, at what point do you think African Americans began to become comfortable I mean, comfortable enough in Mississippi to vote 90% for him? When did this happen, do you think, and how do you read his blackness?
It happened in South Carolina. And it happened for the simple reason, before South Carolina, really before Iowa, the polls indicated that many blacks supported Hillary Clinton, many South Carolina blacks supported Hillary Clinton, and that in essence the black vote was divided. It is divided no more. The reason that it happened, though, many would argue it's because of Bill Clinton's comments and a backlash against that, but it was also for another reason. I saw it happening earlier. It happened when Barack Obama won Iowa. There are very few African American voters in Iowa. When he won the Iowa caucuses, it demonstrated to African Americans that he was a serious African American candidate for president who could win white voters. And they became excited and enthusiastic. And we saw it break out in South Carolina, which was the first primary state with a significant number of African American voters. Two things I would add about Barack Obama. One is, what is most appealing to him, about him to white voters, is that unlike Jesse Jackson and unlike Al Sharpton, both of whom ran for president, his platform has never been one of racial resentment or racial grievances. They ran on racial grievances. His has never been a racial platform. In fact, you might have noticed, if you've covered the campaign, that his audiences often shout, race doesn't matter, race doesn't matter. And that makes him extremely refreshing and something dramatically new to white voters. The second thing about him is not particularly new, but it's interesting. Obama is the successor to a long line of new politics who have advocated an idealistic post-partisan approach to politics. It goes all the way back decades to Eugene McCarthy in 1968, George McGovern, Gary Hart, Michael Dukakis, Paul Tsongas, Bill Bradley, and most recently Howard Dean. They all ran against the politics of the past, but there is one difference. He's getting the same sort of support that they got, what we sometimes call the Volvo voters, the NPR, National Public Radio listeners, the upper middle class wine and cheese liberals, as opposed to the party's blue-collar base. But he adds to that something they never got. None of those earlier New Politics Democrats got black votes. Blacks didn't trust them to deliver. None of them got black votes. Michael Dukakis ran against Jesse Jackson. For the first time, Barack Obama is combining that upper middle class, New Politics liberal vote, which is almost entirely white, with an overwhelming preponderance of black voters, and that is what makes this an unusual and powerful coalition.
Just very briefly, Bill, what has happened to the black base in Hillary Clinton's support?
getting the residual black vote of Mississippi was down to 10%. I would say somewhere between 10 and 20%. And the result is that the many professional black professional politicians who are supporting her because they're part of the Democratic Party's establishment are moving in a way that John Lewis, the civil rights hero, the congressman from Georgia, has done. He shifted his allegiance from Hillary Clinton as a superdelegate to Barack Obama, arguing that he felt compelled to vote the way his constituents voted, and therefore he was supporting Obama. The traditional black Democratic establishment was with Hillary Clinton, and they're beginning to move towards Barack Obama because of pressure from their voters.
Very good. Look, come on, let's see questions on the floor. I'm sorry, we've hogged it this end. Yes, at the back there, if we get the microphone over there, and then back down to the front here, to the middle one.
This is a question for all of you. Could you address the recent criticism that the media has sort of, for lack of a better term, drunk the Kool-Aid when it comes to Barack Obama, that they've fallen for maybe his style over substance, whereas the coverage of Hillary sometimes tends to be typical coverage of a powerful woman. She's too cold, she's too calculating, she's too ambitious. Guilty as charged, or?
Good question. We'll just store it for a minute and just give it to the woman 3 in front of you. And we'll take 2 questions there.
I have the opposite question is, do you feel that the press has been fair in interrogating the marginalization of Obama with come about from the Clinton campaign? Because if you did, I think, for instance, Texas, I'm from Texas, and following it, she did not score a landslide. I mean, in fact, he ended up with quite a good success considering 3 weeks before he was 20 points behind. So I feel the opposite is that he hasn't been getting a fair interrogation. Same with her experience. So
this is the delicious serendipity of television in a way. We get 2 absolutely brilliantly paired questions.
Well, I'm not from television.
No, but more like journalism.
I think yes. I think there is a tendency. There has been a tendency for the media to be kind of quite starry-eyed about Obama, and I think it's something that we've tried to resist and try to be very conscious of. I think one of the problems with the way that we're covering this race at the moment is that we're now sort of caught in covering a process which is the kind of continuing inability of the Democrats to kind of go for one candidate or the other. So I kind of feel quite dispirited about endless primaries, who's won, the breakdown of the demographic vote. And I think that actually what I long to get onto is a more serious interrogation of the kind of the issues, really, what is really going to decide this election in the autumn, whether it's Obama or Clinton, who is the Democratic candidate. And I think we're now trapped in a kind of process coverage. But I think there are issues about whether the media favour one candidate or another. I mean, there's always going to be that. I mean, I don't think that's not unique to the American election. I think that happens in every election. I think we can, I know we don't want to get into British politics here, but I mean, I think we can see all sorts of kind of, biases and starry-eyedness about British politicians too.
I think there was an element of being starry-eyed. But the most clever question I thought that Hillary Clinton posed, or her campaign team posed in the last 2 or 3 weeks, was essentially to challenge the media that they hadn't been fair. And when you do that, what do journalists say? I tell you what, we haven't really gone after Obama. So what you then had was 2 or 3 weeks of people looking into his financial dealings, what one of his team had said to an official in Canada about NAFTA. That was quite clever, because it was a way of saying, look, you guys, you've got to start asking tough questions about Obama. My own sense is actually that probably in the long run these things will kind of even their way out. I don't detect, and I'm sure there'll be lots of people who'd say differently, I don't detect the media, if you like, in America has decided one way or another on the Democratic side. As regards your question in Texas, it's all to do with expectations. You're quite right. The fact that she won on that evening 3 primaries when everybody ourselves included, saying she was fighting for her life. It was a massive victory. You're quite right. A few weeks before, she had been 20 points in the lead. Obama must have felt on that evening, and he actually looked very dispirited, I thought, when he stepped on the stage down in San Antonio. This wasn't the ebullient Obama. This was a man who I think had had a punch thrown at him and he was winded. But that's all about managing expectations. What I find really interesting, and I'm rather sad it happened 10 minutes after the 10 o'clock news had finished, but Hillary Clinton's campaign manager came up to me at literally, must have been sort of 6 o'clock or 5:45 in the evening in Columbus, and said she's won 3 out of the 4. They were that confident. And I found that quite extraordinary when we were reporting that if she doesn't win Texas and Ohio, she might be out of the race. So I think that's all about managing expectations. If you say, you know, it's going to be very tight, and then you win, everybody says great, but on the other hand, you're quite right. You know, a few weeks beforehand, she was way, way ahead.
Bill, I want to bring you in just a moment, but yeah, carry on. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that I like to point out that there's always a phantom candidate in any election named expected. It is not enough to win. You have to do better than expected. If you win but do worse than expected, effectively you lose. Or even if you do about as well as expected, it's not a story. And that's become the big picture in this campaign, have been each candidate trying to be expected or expectations in every race. If you look at Hillary Clinton, she's done something really quite remarkable. She's not just the comeback kid, she's the comeback of the month kid. After losing Iowa, in fact coming in 3rd in Iowa, she was expected to lose New Hampshire. And then miraculously, and that's 5 days later, she came back to life in New Hampshire. Then after being soundly defeated in South Carolina, she held on and did remarkably well on Super Tuesday, winning the major states, New York, New Jersey, California. And then after 11 straight defeats by Barack Obama, everyone was writing her political epitaph. There was speculation, pressure on her to leave the race. And then suddenly she defies expectations and comes back to life a 3rd time in Texas and Ohio. It's been a remarkable sequence of events. But every time she's written off, she somehow comes right back to life.
But, Bill, just to look at the mathematics behind that, if you look at New Hampshire, I mean, the thing I was struck by was that at the end of November, she led Obama by something like 28 points. In fact, on the night, he came within 2 points of her, or 3 points. I mean, he had actually come up 25 points in 1 month. In Texas, similar sort of thing. In California, even more dramatic. I mean, really unbelievable surges. And yet he'd failed and lost.
Exactly.
Extraordinary, isn't it, Bill?
It is extraordinary. But remember that, you know, it's all about the management of expectations. Having won Iowa, he was expected because of the momentum of the campaign. Momentum simply means you win because you're winning. And the momentum of the campaign was expected to drive him to victory in New Hampshire. He did remarkably well in New Hampshire, like Iowa, a state with very few African-American voters. He came very close to winning, and of course, the closeness of it is what kept him in the race. But he didn't win, and that is why she defied expectations. She did much better than expected. In that campaign, the polls all got it wrong, because at the end of the campaign, a lot of women came out to vote for Hillary Clinton to rescue their candidate, particularly older women, and that is really what made it a horse race. But yes, it remarkably well. But every time we see momentum building in this campaign, suddenly something happens to reverse it.
Sounds like Pennsylvania goes to Hillary then. Is that your prediction?
And Pennsylvania is precisely the kind of state that Hillary Clinton should win. It's very Catholic. She's always carried Catholic voters. It's the most unionized state. It has a lot of blue-collar workers. It has the largest population of seniors outside of Florida. Everything points to an expected Hillary Clinton victory, and that's exactly why my advice is don't be so sure.
Right, more questions from the floor. At the back and at the front. At the back first.
I have to say, as someone who's tried to cover Westminster as an outsider, it's very heartening to hear that you guys have had equal challenges covering Washington. My question is, when Clinton first ran for office, it's the economy stupid. So Gavin's alluded to the fact that this time around again it could be the economy stupid, but I'm wondering, what is it stupid?
Mm-hmm. Well, Bill, as you're chuckling, you might as well have an answer there. Bill?
Well, I can try. When the rule in American politics is when the economy is bad, the economy is the issue. When the economy is good, something else is the issue. A war, culture war, something else. Well, the economy is bad and getting worse, and most voters believe we are in a recession. The way this contest for the fall is shaping up is something like the following. John McCain is going to try to turn every economic issue into national security. He already did that. In Ohio, when Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama both said that they would renegotiate the North American Free Trade Agreement, he said, that will antagonize our Canadian allies who are fighting bravely alongside us in Afghanistan, and it will endanger American security. For him, the election is national security. The Democrats will try to change every national security issue into an economic issue. They're talking about the fact that the United States is spending $12 billion a month in Iraq. That's about $400 million per day. And they are talking about how much better that money could be spent in the United States on people with very real and important needs. So you're going to see the two sides really disagreeing on what is the central issue. Is it national security or is it the economy? Experience shows, again, when the economy is bad, the economy trumps everything.
I mean, I agree with all that. There were two things that really struck me when I was there at the beginning of the year, one of which was present and one of which was absent. The thing that was absent was the whole kind of culture wars topics that were so dominant in the last election, things like abortion and gay marriage and all those kind of things that had been big topics previously and just seemed to be absent from the debate completely. The second thing is, and this is related to the economy, is what really struck me is how toxic an issue immigration is in America. And that was incredibly powerful, and I don't think kind of was I don't know, I mean, I just felt it wasn't kind of getting as much play as perhaps it ought to in the British media, but I thought that was a really, really powerful subject. People felt very, very strongly about it. It is all related to jobs and the economy, but I think immigration is going to be a big issue in November. Oh, just one last thing is that, I just don't know how big Iraq is going to play in November, but I was struck to see today on Politico website a poll that says that now 53% of Americans think that things are going really well in Iraq, which was up from 42% about a month ago. And so I wonder if there's sort of some kind of change going on in public opinion. Maybe, Bill, you know about that.
Well, on the Iraq issue, I'll just comment briefly because I want the others to comment. The Iraqis believe things are going better, especially in terms of security, but that hasn't really changed their opinion of the war in Iraq. Americans are still overwhelmingly opposed to the war. It's about 2-to-1 opposition to the war, and Americans want the United States to get out of Iraq. So while they acknowledge that things may have improved on the security front, they're still deeply opposed to the war, and that, of course, puts John McCain in a bind because he is a staunch supporter of President Bush's troop buildup in Iraq, and the Democrats are determined to make that an issue and to argue that electing John McCain would be essentially a third term for George Bush.
Let's have your question, yeah. Wait a minute, let me just have the mic.
I thought we were neglecting the Republicans a little bit. I'd like to ask your opinions about a vice president for John McCain, because he could either play to exemplify his weakness and bring somebody in who's as old as he is and really say, oh, we're a big team here, 2 people with lots of experience, or he could bring in somebody who's, yeah, you're shaking your head already, he's much younger than he is. And I'd just throw a name in the ring here. Condi Rice would be great. She's black and she's a woman. Okay, all right. Stick my hand.
Well, I mean, there are always surprises. Why, if I was John McCain, I wouldn't go anywhere near Condi Rice, and she probably wouldn't want him to go near her. But for the simple reason, it would be a way of saying that he embraces all of the Bush years. And what McCain has to do is not sever himself totally, which he can't, because after all, he's Mr. Surge in terms of supporting Iraq, but he also has to mark out some differences with the administration. And for a man of his age, if he goes for Condi Rice, who obviously on certain levels, you know, because of her gender and her race, you might think would be a smart move, it would be a way of shackling himself you know, to the Bush administration. So I don't think he'll go anywhere near Condi Rice. Probably Bill will tell me I'm totally wrong, but that's my own view. I think he will go for someone, I mean, people are talking about the Florida governor, and I think he will go for someone who is competent, who's obviously younger than him, if anything happened to him. And it could be that John McCain will present himself as somebody who'd only go for one term. You know, he might actually say, that's it, I'm going to be a one-term president. But as I say, I think his real difficulty, John McCain, is that in many instances, particularly in relation to Iraq and foreign policy, there's not much difference between him and George W. Bush. And I think every indication is that America wants significant change. And that's what I think the Democrats will be selling in the autumn.
Did you have any thoughts on vice presidents?
No, I mean, I think he will have to go for someone younger. I think he's already indicated that he might only be a one-term president, or maybe that was a throwaway remark fairly early on.
Along with, I don't know much about economics. Economics is not my strong card, I think. Bill, just very briefly, that Condi Rice matter, would you agree with Gavin?
Yes, he is precisely right. That would instantly define his platform as a continuation of the Bush presidency, the Bush policies. That would doom him. I also do not think he will ever say he will only serve for one term, because that would make him an instant lame duck. The minute, in fact, Republicans would be talking about campaigning for the next nomination before the election even began. That would be crazy. He would never do that. Look, I always say there are 10 reasons why a candidate selects a running mate. 1, pick someone who will help you win. The other 9 reasons don't matter. Because the fact is, there's only one thing on your mind. You must pick someone who will help you win, even if it is your worst enemy. Kennedy chose Lyndon Johnson. That is why a lot of Democrats believe, in the end, the Democratic ticket will somehow have to be some combination of Obama and Clinton, because anything else will tear the party apart and will risk a walkout at the convention. And the only possible way to hold the Democratic Party together is to somehow engineer this ticket, and that both candidates will eventually come to realize it.
What, would you not agree that Obama would be mad to run as Clinton's deputy?
Absolutely.
Why stand by and watch her lose it?
Well, because that would immediately set him up to be the next nominee for the Democratic Party. Becoming vice president does give you a certain standing in the party, and it means that you are the inheritor of the party nomination. Vice presidents, especially if they serve as vice president, almost always win their party's nomination, but very rarely win the presidency. But it is a good way to win the next party nomination.
We've got very little time left. This is the last run. So, Felicity?
Yeah, speaking of the Democratic Party convention, do you think this thing really will go as far as that? Or do you think there'll be some pressure on the superdelegates or the party establishment to unite behind someone? I mean, on one hand, it could be fantastic television. And you can imagine, the networks are probably, rubbing their hands in glee at the thought of this exciting floor battle for the future of the Democratic Party.
Let's hold that one and take another one here. Yes,
Yes, I have a question. Assuming 6 months down the line Obama got elected as president, how do you feel this would affect the perception of America on a world scale?
Oh, that's fantastic.
Good question.
Yeah, very good.
And a last one here. I'm afraid this will have to be the last question. Did you? I think you had a hand up. Yep.
I think one of the reasons why the Democratic race is so liberating is because we don't feel incumbent to talk about policies. It seems because the difference between Hillary and Obama's policies, almost if one of them shifts in a certain direction, there's like a shift for the other. It sort of mediates between the two. There's like a mean between the two ideas. Are there any policy differences? I mean, there was I know the health insurance issue came up a couple of weeks ago, but are there really any policy differences between Obama and Hillary?
I think they're quite marginal, actually. I mean, I think there is a difference on health policy in that I think that Hillary is slightly more progressive policy than Obama's. But I think they're both pretty similar on policies. I think it's much more about the difference between the two candidates is much more kind of cultural than about the minutiae of policy. Just on the other things, I think that I fear it will go to the conventions. I mean, I ought to be saying yes, I hope it does, because you know, as a journalist, you kind of want this thing to go all the way. But I think the party machine will want to try and sort it out ahead of the convention. I'm not sure they'll be able to, because I think the party is now very, very seriously divided on this. And on the question of whether Obama's president, how that would change America's standing in the world, I think it would be a very, very radical change, and I think it would be a very positive change.
I wanted to take up that question. Whilst we were waiting in Columbus, Ohio, some journalists and I were hanging around, and we played a game, and we asked ourselves this question. If Osama bin Laden had a vote in the election, who would he vote for? Now, it's interesting because already I think I heard some Republicans the other day were saying it would be a desire, you know, that Al-Qaeda would be celebrating in the streets if Barack Obama got in. But just think about it for a moment and ask that question seriously. The great thing about American politics is that ability to renew itself, to sever itself from the past. Now, there are a lot of people who believe that under George W. Bush, the image of America has taken a nosedive. It's hard to believe that just after 9/11, they were playing the American anthem outside Buckingham Palace. The whole world was with the United States. And one of the questions that will be put to the Republicans is what happened during that period. Now, I happen to believe, even though I don't believe that Barack Obama will pull out of Iraq as fast as he says he will, because I think there are real difficulties in pulling out of Iraq, just his mere presence there changes the whole view of America. I mean, I've heard him on a platform say, I'm ashamed of Abu Ghraib, I'm ashamed of Guantanamo Bay, I'm ashamed of the very idea that we could be talking about torture. I mean, he has laid out a radically different view of what America should be. And I think what he stands for is the idea that America should go back and discover what its ideals are. I mean, America always talks about its ideals. It's very good at promoting those to America, but sometimes they are completely lost. And I think what Barack Obama, despite all the kind of questions what one might have about how he would deliver, I think he would signify a massive change in terms of the rest of the world. And I think it would be harder, I personally think this, for Al-Qaeda to paint America in the way that it does and to use America as a kind of recruiting sergeant for its ranks. So I'm sorry, I've only focused on one, but maybe I...
No.
Sorry?
Who would Osama vote for?
Who would John McCain, undoubtedly. Well, yes, I would say John McCain. He wants more of the same. Hell, Bush has been gorgeous. A final word from you, Bill, because we've reached our summit, and just a final wrap from you.
Well, let me address the questions that were raised. The one about the world stage, I'll leave to the rest of the panel, because that's something you're more qualified to respond to than I. The differences between Clinton and Obama, the answer to the woman's question was no. There are no differences really of any great magnitude. There are minor differences in their health care plans, which they exaggerate to try to paint each other as some sort of a conservative, retrograde, non-politically correct candidate. But the fact is the differences are minor in terms of policy. The differences really are differences in political style and approach. Hillary Clinton presents herself as a fighter. She says she will fight for what you believe in, she will deliver what you want, she will be there for you, and as Bill Clinton used to say, I will fight for you until the last dog dies. That's what partisan Democrats see and like about Hillary Clinton. And of course, Barack Obama campaigned as a consensus builder, as someone who says, that's exactly the way you cannot get things done in the United States. Because you have to build the consensus, otherwise you can't get things passed. We'll be back here in 40 years debating the same issues, how to get universal health care in the United States. Nothing will get accomplished, and it is not the way to lead. So it's two very radically different styles of accomplishing the same policy objectives. On the question of the convention, that's interesting. Someone suggested that the networks must be rubbing their hands with glee. They are not, because they've just about given up on covering political conventions. They give them only nominal coverage, perhaps an hour an evening, the final speeches. It costs a lot of money. There has never been a big audience for the conventions. So now they're presented with the prospect, maybe there's something that maybe there will actually be news committed at the political convention. We haven't seen that in years. And so they're going to have to invest some money in covering them. They're not very gleeful about that. But the real test is, of course, what happens to the Democratic Party, the superdelegates. I'll just conclude with this observation. The United States is the most populist country in the world. Here, the people rule. That's why we cannot have a strict system. The people don't want it. And cannot have coins that use them. We still have the death penalty because the people want the death penalty. This is a very populist culture. We have turned the nominates to ordinary voters. This is, the superdelegates, in a way, are powerless. If the voters say they want Barack Obama, and Barack Obama ends up with more popular votes in the primary and caucuses, and more delegates popularly elected, those are pledged delegates, I think it will be very risky and, in fact, suicidal for the superdelegates to say the people, which is ordinary rank-and-file Democrats, the people say they want Obama, but we know better, and we're going to nominate Hillary Clinton. That would tear the country apart. That is exactly what enrages Obama voters, who sit madly in their fuzzy slippers late at night, sending vitriolic emails warning of precisely this outcome, that the superdelegates and the party establishment are going to steal the nomination. They are perfectly prepared to create a ruckus, a disruption, to walk out of the convention. The superdelegates dare not do it. There are two dangers. One is that the people will not speak with a clear voice, that it'll be so close to a tie that it won't be clear who has the support of the people, in which case it really is up to the superdelegates to decide. They are going to have to do it, even though they don't want to. And second of all, it could be that you have more primary and caucus voters going for one candidate, but the other candidate getting more pledged delegates because there's a certain amount of distortion in the way delegates are chosen. In that case, you're going to have a real interesting debate. It's not there right now because Barama has a slight edge in both primary votes and in pledged delegates. All I'm suggesting is the superdelegates are really powerless to reverse the voice of the people. And in fact, the superdelegates I know, their preference is not to show up at all. They don't want to have to make this decision. Because if they decide one way or the other, most of them are elected officials, all they're going to do is make enemies. It reminded me of, many years ago when George McGovern was running for Senate, his campaign manager told a story that McGovern was coming to a congressional district, and he telephoned the congressman, a Democrat from that district, and said, I have wonderful news, Mr. McGovern is coming to you to campaign. And the congressman said, I'm very happy to hear that. Actually, I'm going to be in Florida visiting my mother. The manager said, but I haven't told you who's coming. And the congressman said, it doesn't matter. Whenever he shows up, I'm going to be in Florida visiting my mother. The delegates, the super delegates to the convention don't want to be there, don't want to have to make this decision, and they will do everything they can to avoid it.
Bill Schneider, I'd just like to thank you very, very warmly on behalf of all of us. You've really been a wonderful input from there in Honolulu. I figure it's about lunchtime, so I think you should get up and have some lunch. Thank you very, very much. A big round of applause for Bill Schneider.
Thank you. My pleasure to be with you.
Thank you.
And I say aloha.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Well, I mean, I just a final word from each of you, if you want to say something.
No, I'll just go back to what I said at the beginning, is that having felt very, very positive and energized by the whole thing earlier in the year, I now feel quite gloomy about it. But I actually have to say that listening to Bill has made me feel a bit better. But there's no predictions that have come true so far in this race, so we have to wait and see.
I feel a little apocalyptic that it will go down to the convention, and that I think there will be a fight. And I think that I think the Clintons would be quite prepared to get the superdelegates on their side, and in which case McCain will end up president. That would be my prediction, because I think a lot of the people who've been brought into politics by Barack Obama, if they felt by the party insiders they had a sense been pushed aside, come the autumn, come the national election, they'll sit on their hands. So my feeling is, if, and I might be proved wrong here, but if you see Hillary Clinton win at the convention, not before, then I think McCain will be the next president.
I think it's a very wise statement. I would say only one other thing, and I think the worldview question was a very important one. I think the thing which Obama has said, which has broken with all tradition in America, when Raul Castro took over in Cuba, his first response, Barack Obama, was to say, I will talk to him, no preconditions. Hillary Clinton, stuck in the mud, used exactly the same phraseology presidents have used for 50 years. I will want to assure that human rights, that the dignity of humanity, that all the issues that we've had with Cuba are resolved before we start entertaining this ogre. Well, you know, and of course the fact that he's prepared to talk to Ahmadinejad and more or less anybody else. We have passed on in a globalized world from being able to afford prejudice and nonsense in international relations. And from that point of view, I think America would look a very new guy on the block. For that, I would like to thank Gavin very, very warmly indeed for coming, and particularly thank you very much, Harriet, too, and good old Bill over there. I don't know many people who would do an hour in the Frontline Club without the dinner or the drink or the company. I'd like to do one quick thing, and that is, how many Americans are in the audience? Yeah, nice lot. And well, we might as well see what the sense is as to who you would vote for. You, everybody, if you had the opportunity. What is the vote in the Frontline Club tonight? Hands up for Obama. Well, I'm not counting, but I want to see hands up for Hillary. Obama gets it. On that note, I'd like to thank you very much for coming. Thanks a lot.